Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy. Today we're doing a three-way off-road comparison with the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 4xe, the Ineos Grenadier, and the new Toyota Land Cruiser 250. Let's get right into it. And a lot of people think off-road, they think Wrangler. And this new Wrangler has a steel bumper from the factory as well as a winch. And I guess I should say steel bumpers because the rear bumper is also steel. We also have 33-inch all-terrain tires, as well as solid axles front and rear. This comes with a 2-speed transfer case from the factory, as well as an off-road driving mode with a fancy traction control system, sway bar disconnect, and diff locks front and rear. So let's see how the Wrangler performs. First obstacle here is to mimic a long, slow hill climb. So we're in 4-wheel drive low, off-road plus with the Wrangler, and I'm purposefully driving slow. Pretend like you go, up a 33-degree incline like this, but for 500 feet. You're gonna want to be slow and controlled. You're not going to want to go fast, because if you lose control, well, there goes your vehicle and potentially you, right? So with the Wrangler, again, taking it nice and easy, I can feel the Off-Road Plus working a little bit, right? So great traction control system, and the 4-wheel drive low has, the gearing is so low in this that you just can really put down so much power into the ground. The Grenadier is the new kid on the block, but it has all the essentials: steel bumpers. It also has a winch from the factory. This is not the factory tire size, but it can fit 33s. It also has solid axles front and rear, a 2-speed transfer case with a center diff lock. It does come with an off-road mode as well as a waiting mode, and it has diff locks for the front and the rear too. Let's now see how the Grenadier performs. To make things fair with the Grenadier, we are going to have the center differential locked so that that's like full-on 4-wheel drive low, like what you have in the Wrangler. Sorry, I was not nearly as controlled with this. Let's do slow on the top half. Yeah, it was just, the engine was super peaky there. But I mean, I've done this hill in the Grenadier several times, and I can tell you, traction-wise, if you have the center diff locked and everything, it doesn't struggle at all. It does just fine. Land Cruiser is definitely an iconic name in off-roading, and we get the Prado in the US now. Sadly, just plastic bumpers and no winch, but this can easily fit 33-inch tall tires. It's got independent suspension up front and a solid axle in the back. This does have Toyota's now famously capable multi-terrain select and crawl control. It also has a 2-speed transfer case, diff locks for the center and the rear, and a stabilizer bar disconnect. Let's see how the Land Cruiser performs. Oh, center differential locked, 4-wheel drive low. This has MTS, so we are in MTS, just auto right now. I will say, out of all three of the cars, the throttle control on this is by far the best. The Jeep is good when it's in full electric mode, but as soon as the engine turns on, it's too peaky, and the Grenadier, is so heavy that you got to get higher up in the RPMs, and then it kind of has a peaky feel with the power band. So this is definitely the most controllable throttle wise. Off-roading, we're going to be in 4-wheel drive high part-time with the Wrangler, and it still has plenty of torque to be able to get up. Sorry, I forgot this was not as sharp of a term. Anyways, plenty of torque to get up that. And I will say, the compression's actually pretty good over the bigger bumps with this. It's actually quite impressive. This is, oh, I missed my turn. This is like the first Jeep that I feel like can actually handle some of the more not high speed, but middle speed off-roading. It's really nice. And it's actually relatively comfortable too with the suspension. I think that's something else that impresses me quite a bit. Yeah, let's go on this side, sure. Look at the articulation with this thing. It's nutty. Sorry, it's kind of hard for me to see the trails because the grass has grown in on some of these trails. I'm one of the few people that actually off-roads over here, so. But yeah, the suspension, it handles it well. The steering, although a little bit vague, pretty easy to control. And with the articulation this has, yeah, it just goes over rough terrain pretty darn well. This is the most impressive Wrangler when it comes to middle speed off-roading that I have personally ever experienced. And again, this is the 24 Plus JL. It is quite impressive, the control you get with this vehicle. And the power is not bad. We're back in four-wheel drive high with the center diff still locked. And I will say, this thing is a monster. One thing to note, I do feel the power deficit compared to the Wrangler 4xe. The Wrangler definitely has a lot more torque than the Grenadier. The Grenadier suspension feels way more heavy duty though. You feel the extra weight of the vehicle, but the suspension just feels like it takes the bumps and everything a little bit better than the Wrangler, but it's not more comfortable. It's kind of like the difference between driving a half-ton truck and a 2500 series truck, between the Grenadier and the Wrangler with the ride quality. The Wrangler is actually a little bit more comfortable, but you can just tell the Grenadier is just a beefier vehicle overall. And again, like I said, you can definitely feel the weight. That being said, it's pretty easy to maneuver. I would say that it's surprisingly, it doesn't handle quite as well as the Wrangler, but it still does a really good job. And you can tell that this articulates less than the Wrangler. Going over the bumps and everything, there's more body movement with the Grenadier compared to the Wrangler. And so although this is a solid axle vehicle, yeah, it's not so much about flexing. It seems like it's got much more of a setup that it's about being durable, which that's kind of the name of the game with the Grenadier. Four-wheel drive high, center diff locked in the 250 Land Cruiser MTS set to auto mode. Now, I cannot drive as quick in this as I can in the other two, and it's not because of suspension comfort. I would say that this is pretty similar to the Jeep. The Jeep was actually a little bit more comfortable, surprisingly. I think in part of that's the tires. BFGs are notoriously soft, which means they don't last a long time, but they are comfortable. But the biggest problem is this has the least amount of ground clearance and the worst angles as well. So I've got to be careful so that I don't smack the front end. And independent suspension is also notorious for smacking the front end in off-road type situations. But what I will say is, although I'm going at a slower pace compared to the other two, this thing's a little mountain goat. It handles quite well, and it feels the lightest out of the bunch. It is the lightest out of the bunch, but it feels it too. And I will say the steering control on this is a lot better than the other two. The other two aren't bad by any means, but this, I don't get kickback in the steering, and I feel like I've got really good control of the car. And I think a big part of that, again, is the independent front suspension. You don't have that solid axle kind of wishy-washiness. Yeah, this is actually quite impressive. Yeah, those BFGs were really comfortable in the Wrangler. I think it's the tires that helped out the Wrangler quite a bit. I've got heavier duty tires on this Land Cruiser than on the Grenadier. Although I can't go as quick, it's still pretty capable. We're going to have 2 attempts on this obstacle with all of the vehicles. The first attempt is going to be basically only center diff locked, no front and rear diffs locked. And so just relying basically on the traction control systems, if they have it. We bottomed out a little bit there. So this is the Off-Road Plus system. It works really well. It's very, and part of Man, this thing... this thing just bottoms out. And the Jeep articulates so well. I've got the sway bar disconnected. It should be... There we go. I was gonna say it should be able to work out. But yeah, there's the first setup with the diffs unlocked and just using the traction. So I do not expect, and I'm actually gonna open these up so I can hear a little bit better. That's one of the things cool about the Grenadier is the Safari windows. I don't expect to be able to get through this without lockers. Just for video's sake, we are not gonna use lockers for this first attempt. But if this was actually me out in the wild, I would be using the lockers with something like this. And I was gonna get articulated. Got hung up just like the Wrangler. Yeah, see, this doesn't have a fancy traction control system like the other two, and so it's literally just going to dig into the ground. So I think that we can call that, well, not a full-on fail for the Grenadier, but in terms of not having lockers, it's not going to be able to make it through. Let's do the Land Cruiser again. First time through, just MTS. We're in the rock mode. And if the other two bottomed out, this thing's probably going to be pretty rough through here. We've got skid plate protection underneath though, so that should help out quite a bit on the bottoming out side of things so that we don't break anything important. Now I will say again, the throttle control with this one out of the other two is so much better. It is like night and day difference. Okay, this is where we hit with the other two. There we go. Fully expected that. I might be fully hung up to where I cannot... Sorry guys, let me check. Take two. Got to do a completely different line than the other two. We just don't have the clearance. So that does show you a downside with the LC250. So we're still going to try this out. I just have to do a different line. Compared to the other two. And this is still, oh man, it's pushing me completely to the side. This is struggling more than the Jeep did on just traction, because it has way less articulation. So that shows you the benefit of, man, this is really struggling. There we go. That shows you the benefit of solid axles and the articulation. They We've got axles locked, sway bar still disconnected. And you know something I've been thinking about? I think the reason why the Wrangler bottoms out so often is actually because of the articulation. It has some stuff that hangs down pretty low, but yeah, it articulates so well that that low-hanging fruit just ends up bottoming out, versus if a vehicle's tilted more because it doesn't articulate as well. Now I will say, when you have the axles locked, we're definitely using the underbody protection. When you have the axles locked on this thing, it is so controllable. It is absolutely perfection. Just goes right through. And again, we use the underbody protection quite a bit here with the Wrangler. Now the diff lock lights are still blinking, but this should be locked now. Yep, they're locked. I'm just gonna take it easy. I am gonna probably bottom out again, so I just don't wanna scrape too hard. I don't feel too bad though with the Grenadier because I already need to, my front skid plate's already damaged somewhat, so there we are, hanging on it. So I don't feel too bad. Oh, this is not touching the ground right now. So I'm just two-footing it right now, so I'm taking so slow because I think I'm gonna land on my belly again here in just a second. It's hard to actually be smooth with this. There we go. Sometimes. Oh, there we go. Kind of expected that. That was a hard impact. It's a heavy vehicle. But yeah, with the lockers, able to get through. Now, unlike the other two, this does not have a front diff lock. It does have a rear. So we're going to do the same thing with the rear. Well, I think it's still blinking, so it might not be fully engaged. Might take a second. Okay, we should be lined up here pretty well. There we go. Yeah, the rear diff's locked. I will say again, the control with this, the body control and the throttle control is the best. Oh, this is the limitation of a rear diff lock. Let's try that again. So the problem with the rear differential lock and not having a front diff lock as well is the active braking system has to be working on the front, but it has to limit that because it has to send half the power to the rear and half to either side. So it does limit the braking system. So it actually isn't really any smoother. Okay, but we still made it through. To conclude today's video, Wrangler and then Grenadier Land Cruiser are in second place, tied. The reason why I tied the Grenadier and the Land Cruiser, the Grenadier definitely did better with the rock crawling. I mean, clearances were better. Having the triple lock setup meant I had the most amount of control. But then the Land Cruiser did better with the hill climb and then with the middle speed off-roading. Although the clearances aren't as bad, the suspension is way more comfortable and the car is way easier to control. But yeah, the Wrangler definitely shined in today's review. It did everything with ease and it did it better than the other two cars. And so it just goes to show you how much Jeep has improved the new JL Wrangler for the 24 plus model year. Let me know your thoughts.